Hi guys, it's Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be talking about raising the minimum wage as my persuasive speech. So today I'm going to be getting into what the current minimum wage is in our state level and our federal level, and I'm going to be giving you an example of a profile I made up to exemplify how the minimum wage affects people in everyday life in North Carolina alone. And I'm going to be talking about how it affects you as a student and going into the workforce. So let's get right into it. So what is a minimum wage? So a minimum wage is the lowest an establishment can pay its workers by the hour. So at the federal level in America, the lowest you can be paid is $7.25. But because of states' rights, you can go above that as a state precedent. So because of the different cost of living, it differentiates between, like North Carolina, it's $7.25 because the cost of living is lower than such as California, which is $12 because the average cost of living is a lot higher there. And it goes between cities and it also goes between businesses. So in cities like Asheville, for example, Asheville has just decided that their minimum wage would be $15 because the cost of living is a lot different than per se here in Hayesville, where the average cost of living is low and it's $7.25 here. It also differentiates between different businesses. They can decide whether or not to pay their workers higher or they can pay minimum wage. Where I work at an ice cream shop in Hayesville, it's $8.25, so it's $1 above. So my proposal is raising the minimum wage $3 from $7.25 to $10.25 in hopes of raising families above the poverty line so they can prosper more and the minimum wage can be deemed livable. I'll get into that in a little bit, okay? So, the average cost of living. It differentiates between different states, like I said, but in North Carolina, the average cost of living for a single adult living with one child is roughly around $4,200 a year. So, that includes food, housing, taxes, and other expenses it takes to live. So the average of a salary. So I made up this profile of a woman named Holly who's a single mother, and I did this as an example of how the minimum wage affects everyday life for someone who makes minimum wage. So I'll get right into that. So she's fresh out of community college and she decided to start working at a local supermarket in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She lives in an apartment there, so it's a little bit lower than cost of living for a house. And she works 5 days a week, 9 to 5, so 8 hours, and they pay her a minimum wage of $7.25. So she gets paid by the month, and which adds up to about $1,160 a month. So her rent for her apartment is $500 a month, so she pays that, and that leaves her about $660 a month for her and her child to live on. And that doesn't seem like a lot, does it? It's not. It doesn't include paying bills, so gas, electric, anything like that. And it doesn't include supermarket runs, it doesn't include clothes, it doesn't include anything like that, so childcare. So it's a lot lower than you would expect. So what should the minimum wage be raised to? So before I explain that it should be raised to $10.25, because of the cost of living, and I'll get right into that, the math of that. So the poverty level. So what is a poverty level? So a poverty level is a line that is created by the federal government that is deemed livable, and it is different between different states and different countries. So in North Carolina alone, the poverty level for one adult and a child in one household is $16,460 yearly. So if someone makes below that, they are considered poor or below the poverty level. If they make above that, they're considered above the poverty level and they can live off of that. So if you're technically below the poverty level, you're considered not livable. So what you are living at that current moment is not considered something that could be feasible for someone to live off of. So Holly's job gives her $13,920 a year if she works a consecutive 5 days a week for an entire 12 months, 9 to 5. So this puts her well under the poverty line. And that's concerning because that is her making minimum wage. So if we raise the minimum wage up $3, just $3 to $10.25, it would raise her $19,680 a year, which is well over the poverty line and gives her something livable. So if she's trying to raise a child in an apartment in Fayetteville off of a salary that pays her minimum wage, and she gets paid the minimum wage that is $10.25, she would be getting a lot more money a year and monthly. So she would be $3,000 over the poverty line and be well off considered by the government. So why should we raise the minimum wage? So like I said before, the poverty level is quite large, and raising the minimum wage would overall decrease the number of people and families that are under the poverty line. If we raise the minimum wage, people would be getting paid more, and they would be getting more into that and giving back. So if they get over the poverty line, they're not considered poor, and as a country as a whole, we would be considered not as lower income. It would also avoid businesses that try to keep from paying their workers what they're due or what their work is worth. So if they pay minimum wage, they will be forced to pay $3 and above what they're paid now. So if they're paying someone $10.25, they would be well off and not having to skip because it's $7.25. So the biggest argument against this is probably minimum wage is only a starting wage. So a lot of you know starter jobs are jobs that are for people who are just now starting off the workforce. And they're saying that minimum wage is just a starting wage for people to get paid. That's true, but also not all the time. So businesses like to say that they will pay as much as they can for a worker, but not always if it's a lower income job. So if it's something like where I'm working, I work at an ice cream shop, so it's considered a starter job. So their workers are being paid less than what they are sometimes deemed due. Not where I'm working, but some other places. So if someone was paid under a wage that is livable, how will they be allowed to live over the poverty line? They can't. So that is just kind of trumps the idea of it's a starting wage if they're being paid something that they're not trying to start off of. Like I gave the example, Holly, she is not technically starting off in the workforce. She's starting off in a workforce that's different than what she was doing before, but she's starting off trying to raise a child in a home that's alone. So she's alone in an apartment with a child, and she's trying to raise that child alone, so that starting wage should be raised. How will this affect you? So you as a student are sometimes getting starter jobs. So I have a starter job, and some people I know that are my friends, they have starter jobs. So starter jobs are like little jobs that are sometimes given to students or people who are just now in the workforce. So people like me, I'm in classes, I'm doing sports, but I'm also having to do a job because I'm driving everywhere, so I have to pay for gas. So starter jobs are like the grocery store or a McDonald's or just small jobs like that. And they're mostly worked by students and young adults like myself. And people who are the bosses of that assume that all people who work there are going to be the same, but that's just not the case. I personally am living off of my parents' salaries, so I don't have to pay as much. I will just pay for my gas. Some people pay for their car payments, which is a lot more than gas. Some people pay for their family's living wages. So some people, they are helping raise their younger siblings. They help provide for the younger siblings. They help provide for themselves. Even though they're my age, even though they're 17, you don't know exactly what they're going through. So they could be having to pay for a lot of things like food, shoes, clothes, a lot of things that most students don't have to pay for. So if you raise the minimum wage and raise the stereotype that starter jobs need to be paid minimum wage, then they will be getting paid a lot more than what they are deemed before necessary. So people who are students, they will be getting paid well over what they deserved. So Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for taking into consideration what I've given today. Thank you.